Well, let's talk about comedians for a second, because recently I had Carlos Mencia on my show. Do you know Carlos?
Nice dude, man.
Do you know him personally?
Enough to, what's up, bro?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about Carlos going into this interview. I never watched.
Really?
Yeah.
The Joe Rogan thing? You didn't know?
I didn't know about it, right? I didn't know about it. So,
right.
Because I never watched Mind of Mencia, and I'd never seen any of his stand-ups. But I knew the name.
Yeah.
So when the name, he's like, hey, Carlos is interested in doing an interview, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know the name. He's a prominent, Latino comedian. Yeah, let's bring him on, right? So I started doing the research, and that's when I learned about the whole Joe Rogan thing and everything
that was
else
huge.
like that, and the George Lopez thing, and
Joe Rogan, by the way, I think single-handedly destroyed his career.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. So everything is sort of centered around Carlos being accused of stealing jokes.
Yeah.
Number one, have you ever been accused of stealing jokes?
Early on when I started, yeah.
Were you actually stealing jokes?
I you know what? I might have lifted a line from somebody, Greer Barnes. I might have lifted a line.
Okay.
But again, this is, and I'm not, trying to make an excuse, but I was 14. It's my first time getting my feet wet. And I don't know. I didn't know any better. And
Okay.
But since then, no.
Okay, so I spoke to TK Kirkland about this before the interview.
Right.
I said, have you ever been accused of stealing jokes? He's like, all the time. And a lot of which are just false. You know what I'm saying? You do routines and people say, oh, this was like Sinbad. He goes, well, I've never watched Sinbad.
I don't even know how you make that comparison.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But it'd be like a topic that you talked about.
Sinbad in terms of comedic style and tone.
That's what I'm saying.
It's like weed with stems in it. TK Kirkland is cocaine.
Shout out to Sinbad.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, how do you make that comparison?
Right. And like, for example, I asked D.L. Hughley, has he been accused of stealing jokes?
Right.
And he said, yeah, absolutely. Like, it happens to everyone. Sometimes it's not real because, listen, living in this world, you'll come up with the same concepts, right? And it might sound similar or whatever, but people just come up with similar concepts. Everyone watches the same news. You know what I mean? Everyone comes up with... People have similar styles sometimes. But with Carlos, this is something that went to a whole different level. He's, I believe, the first comedian that ever got canceled.
Well, a couple things.
Okay.
First of all, I have a saying, because people sometimes will see somebody do something on television, and then when they see another comic do it on the road, oh, you stole that. And I always go, just because you saw them do it first don't mean they did it first.
Right.
They just got on television, which is a wider audience, and you happen to see it. That don't mean they're the original author. Secondly, one of the biggest things that bothered me about the Joe Rogan thing, and before I say this, let me say this. It's one thing, yes, when you go, there's so many topics that we can talk about. So and that's where sometimes people base plagiarism off of, is they go, well, this guy talked about owning a dog and you talk about owning a dog.
Right.
Well, that's not theft. It's the same subject, but unless it's verbatim, word for word, now we talking something else. Like, and the reason why I stuck to Carlos like that was because there was footage of Aries Schaefer doing a joke. Then you cut to footage of Carlos verbatim. There was footage of George Lopez doing a joke, Carlos verbatim.
Okay, so
but let me get to the bigger example, though.
Sorry, go ahead.
The Bill Cosby joke. And this is a famous joke.
Yeah,
where
the Hi Mom. Yeah.
And Carlos does the same thing. And somebody even made sense of it even more when they went, so you think Bill Cosby went back in a futuristic time machine, saw Carlos do it, then went back to the 70s and did it? That's theft. Like, you're caught red-handed, dude.
Okay, so we talked about these various things in our interview. Because George Lopez actually physically attacked Carlos Mencia at one point. You heard about this, right? And they talked about this he talked about what happened. So one of the jokes that Lopez accused him of stealing from is there was a joke about growing up in a Latino household where your remote was your parents saying go change the channel, right? And George Lopez he stole that joke from me, and he was like, that's interesting. He would say that because if you look at me doing the joke, it was from the 80s, and it was literally, you could see by the video that it wasn't even widescreen. George Lopez's joke came like 10 years later. You could just tell by the video of how it looks.
Right.
And he goes, and when he accused him, he was like, yo, you're using my joke. And he was like, I did the joke first. And, you know, George Lopez was like, well, I'm older, so you need to stop doing that joke.
We're outside of the Laugh Factory, and he goes, bro, you did 7 minutes or something like that in my act. And I go, George, I didn't. I don't watch you to do that. I watch you to stay away from stuff, not to do stuff. Like I literally, if I watch other Latino comedians back then, it was more about what to stay away from, what not to do. You know what I mean? What not to go to, what gets stepped on too much, you know, white people this, Mexicans that, like that kind of stuff. So he said, Taco Bell joke. And I go, bro, you seriously want to claim a Taco Bell joke? And he said, well, you know what? Even if you didn't steal it, I've been doing this longer. Out of respect, you should stop doing the joke.
You know what I'm saying? So some of this stuff is sort of, is very gray area.
Yeah.
And, you know, listen, when
was it verbatim?
I mean, it almost sounds like George Lopez took it from Mencia, honestly, in this case. You know, I understand the Bill Cosby thing. You know, I know the joke that, you know, like, the first time you score a touchdown, even though the dad did all the work, you go, hi, Mom. You know what I mean? So did he watch? You know, I mean, that was an epic stand-up by Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
I saw it as a kid. Did he see it?
It's probably hailed as his greatest.
Yeah.
That's his delirious.
That's his delirious.
Yeah.
Did Carlos see it? Don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe he did.
Yes. If he didn't see it and it was verbatim like that, well, then he should have been buying lottery tickets his whole life.